He had gold like no other,
unparalleled wisdom, and absolute power.
But the Bible records something strange at the end of Solomon's life.
no miracle, no glory, no divine farewell.
How did history's richest and wisest man end up alone?
Forgotten and spiritually empty?
The answer dismantles our entire idea of success before God.
Before continuing, leave a like, subscribe to the channel and stay until the end because the details that come now are almost never explained in this way. The lonely end of the richest man in the world, the death of Solomon. No battle, no murder, no palace conspiracy. The richest man Israel ever knew died in silence. 700 wives, 300 concubines, 25 tons of gold entering per year, a temple that took 7 years to be erected, and in the end, just one phrase in the scriptures. Solomon slept with his fathers. No speech, no farewell, not a single tear recorded. How does someone who had absolutely everything end with such an empty finish? To understand this death, you need to go back to the beginning. And Solomon's beginning was so extraordinary that it seems like fiction. Jerusalem, 970 years before Christ. David, the greatest king Israel had ever seen, is dying. The body ages too fast. Blankets cannot warm him. The servants bring a young woman named Abishag to lie beside the king and keep him warm, not as a wife, but as a living nurse. The man who killed Goliath, who fled from Saul, who conquered Jerusalem and unified the tribes, now needs borrowed heat to survive one more night. Meanwhile, in the palace corridors, the war for the throne has already begun. Adonijah, one of the oldest sons, gathers chariots, horsemen, 50 men to run before him. The visual was deliberate. He who has an escort like this is he who rules. Adonijah already considers himself the next king. He organizes a coronation banquet on the mount beside Jerusalem, invites allied generals and priests, serves food and wine as if the transition were already decided, already to assume power. But David had made a promise, and that promise had a name: Solomon. The prophet Nathan perceives the danger and architects the intervention. First, Bathsheba enters the dying king's chambers. She reminds him of the oath David made years before. "Thou swearest by the Lord that Solomon would reign after thee." While she still speaks, Nathan enters and confirms the urgency. Adonijah is crowning himself at this moment. If David does not act now, tomorrow Bathsheba and Solomon will be dead. David reacts. Even weak, even old, the mind still works. He orders that Solomon be placed on the royal mule, maximum symbol of authority, animal that only the king rode, and taken to the spring of Gihon. Zadok, the priest, pours oil over the young man's head while trumpets sound. The people who are there shout, "Long live King Solomon!" The sound crosses the valley and reaches Adonijah's party. Imagine the scene. In the middle of the banquet, distant trumpets. The guests look at each other. The sound increases. A messenger arrives running with the news. Solomon has been anointed king. David ordered it. The coronation has already happened. In minutes, the guests abandon the table, each one to his own side. Adonijah runs to the tabernacle and grabs the horns of the altar, desperate gesture of one who begs for sacred asylum. Solomon sends word that he will be spared. For now, any slip will be fatal. In a matter of hours, the transition is complete. Solomon is about 20 years old, and now he carries the weight of a whole kingdom on his shoulders. Think of the size of this situation. A young man without military experience, without battles won, without great deeds recorded, inheriting an empire that his father built with blood and sword during 4 decades. The northern tribes still hold ancient resentments. The Philistines, although weakened, remain present on the coast. Edom to the south, Moab and Ammon to the east, all watching, waiting for any sign of weakness. Egypt maintains strategic interest in the region, the kingdoms of Mesopotamia as well. Solomon is surrounded. And it is exactly in this moment when everything could collapse that something extraordinary happens. God appears to him in a dream. It was in Gibeon, where the main place of sacrifice was before the temple existed. Solomon had gone there to offer 1,000 burnt offerings, 1,000 animals burned on the altar. And that night God came to him, not with demands, with an offer. Ask what thou wilt that I give thee. Open question, without declared limits. The young king could ask for invincible armies, could ask for the death of all enemies, could ask for 300 years of life or wealth that never ended. But his answer reveals a heart that had not yet been corrupted by power. He asked for wisdom, specifically an understanding heart to judge the people and discern between good and evil. He recognized that he was too young, too inexperienced, too small for the task, and he asked for help. The answer pleased God so much that it came with a monumental bonus. Solomon would receive not only discernment to judge, but also that which he did not ask for, wealth and honor as no other king would have in his generation, and more. If he walked in the ways of the Lord, keeping statutes and commandments, he would gain long life too. Complete package, delivered to someone who demonstrated humility in the most tempting moment possible. Solomon woke up. It was a dream, but the consequences would be absolutely real. And what came after surpassed any expectation. His fame crossed borders even before building anything. The capacity to resolve impossible disputes became legend throughout the region. The most famous case you probably know: 2 women, prostitutes who lived in the same house, each with a newborn baby. During the night, one suffocates her own son unintentionally and switches the bodies while the other sleeps. In the morning, the dispute reaches the king. No witness, no physical proof. 2 women pointing at one another, each swearing that the living child is hers. What would you do? Solomon asks for a sword. Orders that the child be cut in half for each one. One agrees immediately, without hesitating. The other screams desperate, "Give her the living boy, for the love of God, do not kill him." There was the true mother, because a real mother prefers to lose the son to another than to see the son dead. All Israel heard the sentence and trembled before the king, because they saw that the wisdom of God was inside that man to do justice. The story ran through the ancient world like fire in dry straw. Kings from distant lands sent emissaries just to check if the reports were exaggerated. Merchants adjusted trade routes to pass through Jerusalem. Philosophers, scribes, and curious people came from 3 different continents. The city began to grow not only in population, but in intellectual, political, and economic influence. But Solomon did not want to be known only for wise words. He wanted to transform words into stone. He wanted to build something that would last forever. The most ambitious project was the temple. David dreamed of it his whole life, accumulated materials for decades: gold, silver, bronze, iron in absurd quantities, made detailed architectural plans, prepared everything. But God did not permit a man of war to erect the sacred house. David had shed too much blood. That honor would fit the son, the man of peace, and Solomon embraced the mission on a scale that Israel had never seen. The numbers are difficult to process. 30,000 Israelites conscripted to work in Lebanon, cutting cedars in the mountains. They worked in shifts. 10,000 per month went to Lebanon, spent 30 days there felling trees, and returned for 2 months at home. Continuous rotation for years. Besides them, 70,000 men served as bearers, transporting logs and stones through the mountainous paths. 80,000 cutters worked in the quarries of Israel, extracting huge blocks that would be hewn with millimeter precision. And 3,300 supervisors coordinated the whole operation. More than 180,000 workers involved in a single project. To put in perspective, the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza, one of the greatest works of ancient humanity, would have used between 20 and 30,000 workers. Solomon mobilized 6 times more people, 7 years of construction, every centimeter coated with the most precious materials available on the planet. Pure gold, beaten into very thin sheets, covered all the internal walls from floor to ceiling. Cedar of Lebanon, the most valued wood of the time, aromatic, resistant, practically incorruptible, formed the panels and the beams. The smell must have been intoxicating. And here comes an impressive detail. The stones were cut with such absurd precision there at the quarry that they arrived ready at the construction site. They needed no adjustment. The biblical text makes a point to record, during all the construction, no sound of hammer, axe, or any tool of iron was heard at the temple site. It was as if the building emerged, in silence, reverent, as if the stones themselves knew they were forming something sacred. Inside, two main rooms, the holy place, where the altar of incense coated in gold, the table of showbread, and 10 lampstands of pure gold stood, 5 on each side. And the Holy of Holies, a perfect cube of 10 meters on each side, completely coated in gold, where the Ark of the Covenant would rest. 2 giant cherubim carved in olive wood and covered in gold guarded the Ark, wings extended from wall to wall, touching in the center. When it was ready, Solomon organized a dedication, ceremony that lasted 14 days. All Israel was summoned, people from all tribes, from all cities filling Jerusalem. The sacrifices border on the unbelievable. 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep, 142,000 animals offered in 2 weeks. The normal bronze altar could not handle so much. Solomon had to consecrate the entire central courtyard to hold the burnt offerings. The smoke must have been visible for kilometers, rising like a dense column toward the sky. And then happened what no one expected. When the priests came out of the holy place after positioning, the ark, a cloud filled the whole house of the Lord. So dense, so heavy that the priests could not stand to minister. They had to leave. The glory of God, the same presence that appeared on Mount Sinai, that guided Israel through the desert as a column of cloud and fire, was taking possession of the new dwelling. It was the confirmation. God accepted that house. Solomon knelt before the whole congregation of Israel, arms extended to the sky, and prayed one of the longest and most theologically profound prayers of the whole Bible. He asked that God hear the supplications made in that place, asked for justice, for forgiveness, for rain in time of drought, for victory in time of war, for mercy even for the foreigner who came from afar to worship. That was the peak, the highest point of the entire trajectory. If the story ended there, it would be perfect, but it did not end. After the temple, Solomon built his own palace, and this project took 13 years, almost double the time dedicated to the house of God. 7 years for the temple, 13 for the palace. The detail did not go unnoticed by commentators throughout the centuries. The palace complex was immense, the house of the forest of Lebanon, a hall supported by 45 massive cedar pillars, 50 meters long by 25 wide, 300 shields of beaten gold decorating the walls. It was there that Solomon received dignitaries and impressed the world. The porch of pillars, the throne room, where he judged the most important cases and dispatched royal decisions. The throne itself was a unique work of art, made of pure ivory and coated in gold, with 6 steps of access, arms flanked by carved lions, and 12 more smaller lions distributed on the steps, 6 on each side. The biblical text affirms that nothing equal existed in any other kingdom of the world, and there was a separate residence for Pharaoh's daughter, marriage that sealed an alliance with Egypt. This was unprecedented. Egyptian kings did not usually give their daughters to foreign rulers, but Solomon was different. His fame had become so great that even powerful Egypt wanted to be linked to him. Do you perceive what is happening? The king who started by asking for wisdom to serve the people now accumulates structures to exhibit power. The leader, who was praised for humility before God, now multiplies symbols of self-grandeur. The transition was gradual, almost imperceptible to those who lived inside it, but the biblical text leaves clues along the way. Solomon's wealth reached levels that defy modern imagination. 666 talents of gold entering the coffers each year. This equates to about 25 tons of the precious metal, just from regular tributes, not counting what came from merchants paying passage fees, traders seeking favors, and allied kings sending gifts to maintain good relations. Silver lost value in Jerusalem. Literally, it became common as stones in the street. Cedar of Lebanon, noble wood that other nations could barely import, was treated in Jerusalem like sycamore, an abundant and cheap tree. Solomon built a merchant fleet in partnership with Hiram, king of Tyre. The ships operated from Etzion-Geber on the Gulf of Aqaba and made routes to Ophir, probably on the coast of Arabia or East Africa. Every 3 years, these ships returned loaded with gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks, as if the treasures of the whole world flowed naturally to Israel's feet. And it was in this context of extreme abundance that the most famous visit of the entire reign arose. The Queen of Sheba heard of Solomon's fame and decided to see with her own eyes if the reports were exaggerated. She traveled probably from southern Arabia, present-day Yemen, a journey of more than 2,000 kilometers through hostile deserts. The caravan was immense, camels loaded with spices in quantity never seen, gold in abundance, precious stones of every kind. It was not a casual visit, it was a diplomatic expedition of the highest level. When she arrived, she tested Solomon with hard questions, riddles, philosophical questions, problems that demanded not only accumulated knowledge, but deep discernment and quick reasoning. He answered them all, without hesitating, without erring. The queen was left breathless. The Hebrew text says that there was no more spirit in her, an idiomatic expression indicating absolute shock, almost fainting. It was not just the wisdom of the answers. It was the palace, the uniformed servants, the impeccable organization, the food served, the clothes of the officials, the way everything functioned like a perfectly lubricated machine. She declared that the reports she had heard in her land did not reach even half of the reality. Blessed are thy men, blessed are thy servants. This was the peak, maximum glory. The whole world recognized Solomon as the greatest of all kings, but the more the biblical text describes the wealth, the more another element begins to appear between the lines, an element that would change absolutely everything: the women. But King Solomon loved many strange women. The phrase appears in 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 1, and it functions as a watershed in the narrative. The tone changes, the rhythm changes. What was a story of ascent turns into a story of fall. They were not anonymous concubines from just any harem. They were daughters of kings, princesses of specific nations, with whom God had expressly forbidden marriage: Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, Hittites. The prohibition was clear in the law, and the reason too. Surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. And that was exactly what happened. 700 wives of royal blood, 300 concubines, 1,000 women in all. Even for an Oriental king of antiquity, accustomed to harems as a symbol of power, this number is absolutely extraordinary. Each royal marriage represented a political alliance, a treaty sealed with flesh and blood. Each alliance brought with it a culture, a religion, a diplomatic pressure for the king to respect the gods of the new wife. Solomon began to yield. First, he allowed altars to be built for foreign gods on the hills around Jerusalem. Diplomatic concessions, he perhaps rationalized, political necessities. Later, the text indicates that he himself started frequenting them, burning incense, offering gifts, participating in rituals. The biblical text lists the names Ashtoreth, goddess of the Zidonians, associated with fertility and war; Milcom, also called Molech, the abomination of the Ammonites, whose cult in some traditions involved child sacrifice; Chemosh, the abomination of Moab. The same king who consecrated the temple to the unique God of Israel now maintained active altars for these deities in the outskirts of the holy city. How does someone who received wisdom directly from God, who saw the divine glory fill the temple, who prayed on his knees before the whole nation, end up burning incense to idols of stone? The answer is in a detail of the text that is easy to miss. When Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods. When he was already old, it was not a sudden fall. It was erosion. Decades of small concessions, years of tolerances that seemed harmless. An altar here, an incense there, a ceremonial participation over there. Until the heart that one day belonged entirely to God came to be divided among many masters. The man who built the only legitimate house for the true God on all the earth now multiplied houses for false gods. The king who prayed on his knees arms extended to the sky, now bowed before mute statues. The wisdom that should have protected him was not enough to save him from himself. God did not remain silent. The text records that the Lord was angry with Solomon. The Hebrew word indicates deep anger. Twice God had appeared to him personally, in Gibeon and after the dedication of the temple. Twice he gave clear instructions: walk in my ways, keep my statutes. And even so, the king turned away. The consequence was announced directly. The kingdom would be torn from his hands and given to a servant, not during Solomon's life, because of the covenant with David, but through the son. One tribe would remain with Solomon's lineage. The rest would be lost. From here on, the narrative changes tone completely. Adversaries arise where before there was total peace. Hadad, an Edomite prince who fled to Egypt while still a child during David's bloody campaigns, returns as an adult and begins to hostilize Israel from the south. Rezon establishes himself in Damascus and becomes a constant thorn in the side, leading bands that attack caravans. But the most significant adversary came from within the kingdom itself: Jeroboam, an Ephraimite from the northern tribes, a competent administrator whom Solomon had promoted to supervisor of all forced labor. One day, leaving Jerusalem, Jeroboam met the prophet Ahijah on the way. Ahijah was wearing a new garment. He took the garment, tore it into 12 pieces, gave 10 to Jeroboam. Take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. Solomon knew of the prophecy, and his reaction reveals how much he had changed since the days of Gibeon. Instead of repenting, instead of fasting, instead of seeking the face of God as he did when young, he tried to kill Jeroboam. The man who started with humility now acted with murderous paranoia. Jeroboam fled to Egypt to the court of Shishak and remained hidden there, waiting. Meanwhile, the kingdom that seemed so unshakable was cracking from within. Solomon's prosperity had a cost that the people paid: forced labor, heavy tributes. The northern tribes carried disproportionate weight. Resentment grew in silence, masked by the general wealth but ready to explode as soon as the king's strong hand was removed. And the last years? The biblical text offers surprisingly little. Unlike David, whose death is narrated with richness of details, instructions to the successor, settling of scores, last words, farewells, Solomon simply disappears from the active narrative. And the rest of the acts of Solomon and all that he did and his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the Acts of Solomon? Then only this: and the time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years, and Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. 40 years of reign, and no final word recorded, no blessing over the air, no confession, no documented repentance. Silence. It is in this narrative void that many scholars situate the composition of Ecclesiastes, a book radically different from everything Solomon wrote before. Proverbs was confident, full of absolute certainties, about how to live well. Ecclesiastes is something else. It is a text of questioning, of deep melancholy, of bitter existential reckoning. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. The Hebrew word is hevel. It means breath, vapor, something that appears and disappears without leaving substance. The second chapter is devastating. The author describes in detail everything he undertook. Built magnificent houses, planted vineyards, made gardens, dug pools, acquired servants, gathered silver and gold more than all who came before in Jerusalem, had singers and pleasures of every kind. And the conclusion? Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and behold, all was vanity and chasing after the wind. This is not the tone of a victorious young man. It is the tired sigh of an elderly man who had absolutely everything and discovered that none of it filled the void. The book ends with advice that sounds like late repentance. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It was what he knew from the beginning. It was what God asked since Gibeon. It was exactly what he ceased to do when the concessions began. Death came without recorded drama, without description of illness, without a farewell scene. Just the standard formula: slept with his fathers, natural death, buried in Jerusalem. But what did he leave behind? Rehoboam, his son, inherited the throne without inheriting the wisdom, and in a matter of days destroyed what took generations to build. When the northern tribes came to ask for relief from forced labor and taxes, Rehoboam consulted the elders first. They advised moderation. "If thou wilt be a servant unto this people this day, then they will be thy servants forever." Rehoboam ignored the advice. He consulted the young friends who grew up with him in the luxury of the palace. They suggested a heavy hand, to demonstrate strength from the first moment. Rehoboam's answer entered history. "My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions." The 10 northern tribes rebelled on the spot. Jeroboam came running back from Egypt and was proclaimed king of Israel. Rehoboam was left only with Judah and Benjamin in the south, the kingdom that David unified with blood and that Solomon consolidated with gold broke in two. It would never be reunited again. The crack that started silently in Solomon's heart now cut the entire nation from north to south. The temple he built survived 370 years, until being completely destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar in 586 before Christ. Of the magnificent palace, of the house of the forest of Lebanon, of the throne of ivory and gold, not one stone remains upon another. Of the 700 wives and 300 concubines, no individual name is remembered. Of the gold that made silver seem like common stone, nothing reached the following generations. What remained were the writings, Proverbs, Song of Songs, Ecclesiastes, and the lesson embedded in the story itself. Solomon did not lose the throne. He was not deposed nor publicly humiliated. He died a king, surrounded by palaces, servants, and structures of power. But he died divided, and a short time after the funeral, the kingdom he consolidated broke in two, exactly as had been announced. What his story teaches is not about the fragility of the body. It is about the fragility of the human heart before excess. Solomon did not fall through ignorance. He fell through concessions. A tolerance here, an altar there, a diplomatic marriage over there. Small deviations that added up over decades changed the direction of a whole life. He wrote that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but in the end he discovered that wisdom without fidelity turns into a burden, and that abundance without purpose always ends in the same place: loneliness.